Montessori classroom. Practical life is a love of mine. I think of it as the foundation of so many things that the children are going to be exposed to in this classroom and in life beyond it. It's really building so many skills that they'll need to be able to succeed in tasks here and beyond. How, you ask? We start with some very basic things, some things that I think it's easy to miss the importance of, but at its most basic, practical life work can be simply transferring an object from one vessel to another over and over and over again. In doing this, you might start with this grip here and spill all over the place, but as we work through this, we're kind of refining our grip using a pincer grip to be more careful and deliberate with our movements. We're working towards remembering to return things the way that we found them, so that our environment is prepared for the next person, the other inhabitants, and the next user of this material. In doing this, we're not only building the strength of the hand, we're building the appreciation for patience and repetition, which, as they move through the curriculum, will become more and more of a demand with the work they approach. As they move through some of these materials, you'll see that they're tasked with heightened challenges, more control of the hand, balancing a utensil, moving slowly, taking their time, moving from left to right, as they'll someday do when they're writing on a page, and building that patience to return the work as they found it. And thank you for your patience as I return the work the way I found it. It's always one or two. There we go. Now, in practical life, there are, like I said, so many implications for their future in the classroom and at home. There are materials that help us at the snack table. This work here is it's simply tasking them with cleaning up their crumbs and returning them to, in this case, this vessel. But when we think about the snack table and what that usually looks like after 2-3-year-olds have enjoyed their Ritz crackers and whatnot, it's usually a sandstorm on the table, and building up that ability to be able to manipulate one of these at the snack table and prepare that space for the next person. That's a practical life activity. When we look to things like the dressing frames, these have direct correlations to dressing oneself and preparing oneself for the outdoors, or changing clothes if they've had a spill. So practice with these makes us more capable to be caretakers of ourselves. Some other works here, more refined movements in practical life materials might have us using a pincer grip, direct implications for their writing work later on, and to take their time to slowly, carefully twist off a kernel of corn, place it in the container, slowly, carefully twist off. We got good corn this year. Last year they were flying everywhere. This year they've been pretty manageable. But the patience it takes to do that is really admirable, and I think it's something that is a big part of what makes the Montessori classroom what it is. Having the patience, developing that patience in them to stay with something like this that we adults might find really tedious. The first day I put this corn work out, I don't know how many stalks we went through, and it was just amazing to see the stamina that our children had to be able to repeat this process and stay with it for such a long time. I know I don't have it, but so as with any area in a Montessori classroom, the work is getting increasingly difficult as we move through it. In their first year, students are spending a lot of time with this basic transfer works and working up to works where maybe they're coordinating movements with two hands. Eventually, when they arrive in their kindergarten year, they've been developing these increasingly fine motor skills, and they've spent a lot of time using two hands coordinating, and they've been tasked with staying with their work for very long times, and they've built that patience to be able to do really complicated multi-step works. This one, for example, is a work that I don't have a name for yet, but it's something that's been really popular among our kindergartners, and something that we've been getting a lot of questions from younger students about when it will be their turn, but in due time, as they develop their skills. This work tasks children with drawing a line on each corner of a block of wood. Once each corner has that line, it's their job to sand the line off until no lines remain. So we have all round edges on here. That would be step one. Later they go to our polishing shelf, our polishing area over here, where they spend time as first and second year students learning how to polish various materials. They'd apply a finish to their wood. Using their patience, they would wait for that to dry, sometimes overnight, which can be a big challenge. Eventually, they get to put their block of wood in a vise, and we give a lesson on how to use an old-timey drill and show them, the coordination of being able to, holding it in two areas at once, and to keep the control of your gross motor movements as you're going through and not going back this way. That doesn't work, but going through slowly and steadily, and not like this, but straight up and down until they drill through. They've got their block of wood, which is fully finished. And then they get back to threading, which is something they've encountered a million times in practical life materials. And there they have their finished product in this many-step material. So that's just a quick look at the progression of practical life in a Montessori classroom.
The sensorial area is full of materials that give a clear impression of concepts that we can learn with our five senses, from visual and color to tactile, like rough and smooth, and fabric matching, smell and taste with smelling bottles and food works, hearing with the sound cylinders, where we can think about loud and soft and match. Plus the spatial sense and the way all of these things can relate together. One thing that's really important to know about the sensorial area is that Maria Montessori designed them with a concept called isolation of stimulus. So the pink tower, for example, is pink. It's one color because instead of many children's toys today that you see that have color and number and letters on them and pictures, she made it one color so that the idea is clear. This is all about the largest and the smallest. And it delivers its isolation of stimulus with great precision. The tiniest, smallest cube is 1 centimeter, and the largest cube is 10 centimeters. So it progresses into a unit of measure concept that's right here, that they manipulate, that they work alongside with other materials that give them the ways that things relate. The foundation that's built in the sensorial area leads directly into the math and language areas. For example, the red rods here on the shelf and these first 4 correspond directly to the number rods. So they have the same values as the 1 rod and the 2 and the 3 in the number rods. The concepts of geometry have a clear relationship to the world of mathematical thinking. But instead of worrying about things on paper and pencil, we have the binomial cube, the trinomial cube, and then the big one, the decanomial. And its colors even correspond to the counting beads in the math area. The constructive triangles show how triangles can go together to make other shapes, geometry. The geometric solids are really, at their core, a naming activity. Instead of trying to explain to a child, well, a cube has this and that attribute, we can say to the young child, this is a cube. And it's very clear what that is. Here's a sphere, here's a cone. Even some fancy ones that I didn't even learn until my Montessori training, like ovoid and ellipsoid and rectangular prism. These are rectangular prisms, by the way. So, ultimately, everything that a child works with in the sensorial area also supports their fine motor with small handles for puzzles from the geometric cabinet, the knobs for the knob cylinders. These cylinders go together, by the way, so they can, with the knobless cylinders, they can do some of the same understanding that they get from this work, but now they can make a tower and see how they relate together when they stack upon each other. They support fine motor and a sense of order with the relationships of how things go together. Ultimately, learning about our world through the senses extends directly into the cultural area. When we start with the rough and smooth globe, this will go into the maps, into learning with our senses about science and the world. Thank you.
I want to talk a little bit about the preparation for language in the Montessori curriculum and why it's a great thing if your child comes home and says they've poured beans day after day after day after day. Practical life and sensorial come first within the Montessori curriculum because we're developing that concentration, the focus that they're going to need for this language work, the focus they're going to need for the math work, their movement of the hand so many times pouring those beans, or maybe moving small balls onto golf tees that are in the clay work, and movement of carrying the tray filled with water and heavy things. All of that is going to lead to the ability to focus and concentrate on the language work. All those times they're picking up the cylinder from the cylinder block with these 3 fingers is practice for holding a pencil so that when it comes time to write and they're ready, they're maybe not holding it like this, but they're holding it this way. And so lots and lots of practice in the practical life and sensorial area is going to allow the child to participate fully in the language curriculum. But from day one, language begins. And language is many things. And in our classroom, which might not be something you see in a typical classroom, the teacher gets down to eye level, the child gets to see your mouth move, the way you're making the sounds, the way your lips are moving, you're speaking clearly and slowly, you're using intelligent vocabulary, you're not using baby talk, and language is developing right then and there. And then you might sit down, the teacher will sit down with the child and talk about some pictures. What do you see in this picture? Do you know, this is called a panda, did you know that? So you're giving background information for later stories you might read, or developing vocabulary. These are called tusks that the elephant has. And you're doing a matching work, maybe. Matching two things together, but at the same time you can talk about it. This is a concentration game I put together for Halloween. So the child is trying to find two pictures that match, and then they might talk about, this is a spider, this is a skeleton. And one of my most favorite works in the area of language in the Montessori classroom is what's called the sound game and what's often called I Spy. When you have these small objects that the children love to look at. Whenever I start a game of I Spy, I have many children walk over to join. They want to do it too. And it's simply saying, I spy with my little eye something on the mat that begins with eh, eh. And they're learning that words have sounds. And the more they practice, one day they'll say, elephant. And then you can also do this with ending sounds, when they know their beginning sounds. What ends with t, t, t. And this time it's the elephant again, but it's what ends in t. And then middle sounds as well. This is always going to come first. This is phonemic awareness. You have to, in the language curriculum, to be successful, you're going to learn the sounds before you put the sound with the symbol. This down here is a rhyming work. Rhyming is a great indicator of how well we understand our language. If we're ready to, if we're not rhyming it, maybe that gives insight into why a child's not hearing the beginning sound in a word for a really long time. These are sandpaper letters, also the core of our curriculum, and we're learning the sounds as we trace them, so it's muscle memory. And we're learning the sounds and not the name, because if we know the sound, we're going to be able to write them down with the movable alphabet much sooner and make words, because the name of this letter isn't going to help me spell a word. And in our classroom, we have these nice little booklets that the child gets. In the beginning, I tell them these are all the letters of the alphabet that we're going to learn, and we circle them and cross them off as we go. And when they've learned all their letter sounds, they get to take it home. Once the child knows about 12 of these, and this box is manageable for them, occasionally a child will, look at this box and be overwhelmed by the amount of letters. So I might do a few more sandpaper letters before visiting this. The same idea will come later in language, and I'll explain it to you when we get to the books. But now that they know a bunch of letter sounds, we can make some words. So, let's find it in the box. Ah, ah. And p, p. And this work is very important because the child is now writing, and they don't even need to pick up a pencil. They don't have to worry that their muscles aren't strong enough, or they don't have a firm grip they're writing already. And they can do this for as long as they need to. And it's fun. I can give them little picture cards. They can spell the word using the picture, hat, and objects, cat. And this box can be used for many things, but in the beginning it's going to be phonetic words. Let's sound them out. Phonetic words are words that you can sound out. The metal insets, tracing. I love the metal insets. Just today, our friend Abigail was trying to write the letter 8, write the number 8, and when she was doing it, it was kind of a struggle until I mentioned how she practiced the circular metal inset so many times, and she was like, right, just like that, and then she was able to, that muscle memory of tracing that circle so many times, she was able to get that 8 circle on bottom, circle on top, and she was very proud. This is developing your pressure on paper, pencil grip, all the things needed before you go and write letters or numbers on paper. You're having fun with it and you're being artistic. Talking about doing many things at one time, we're still working on all of those things down there, but we're just adding 2. And maybe you're going to match up some labels to some phonetic objects. Maybe you want to match up a label that says hat to a hat. Rug, you're going to match it up. Lots of work with matching up pre-made labels, right? You're not writing it. Pre-made labels to the object. So you're seeing the word, you're seeing more words, you're building more words. You're not asked to write just yet. I mean, if you want to write, go for it. But so many times in my traditional teaching career, the children just got frustrated with language because, the first thing sometimes I would ask them to do is write their name on paper, and not realizing how difficult that was for a child at that age until I had my Montessori training. At the same time, we're learning these puzzle words that you can sound out, right? And I tell the children that you just have to memorize them. He, we, words that you can sound out. Little different than Dolch words or sight words. Puzzle words that can be sounded out phonetically, no matter how hard you try. And there's 9 packets of those, 10 packets of those, rather. And these are going to help with later readers when they see these words and they can sound them out. They're just going to know it. It's going to help with the fluency of reading as well, which is the speed. We'll learn 3 at a time in a 3-period lesson. This is you. This is I. This is was. Can you point to you? Can you point to I? Can you point to was? Can you put I down here? Can you put was up here? Can you put you over there? Let's play knock knock. Knock knock. Who's there? You. Knock knock. And as soon as they remember them, we build them. Another reinforcement of the word. We build them with this small movable alphabet. And then if they're writing by this point, they want to try and write them down, they're more than welcome to. And if children are writing now, they might have a journal, my writing journal, write down their thoughts, words, whatever they like. A word study notebook usually comes in around the time when they're learning 2 letters can make 1 sound, a phonogram. A-U says aw. We practice that. We're going to find it in our book and we're going to write down all the words we learned that have the A-U sound, says aw. We might even read them in a book. You remember what A-U says, or in this case A-I says A? Whenever you see A-I, you're going to say A. Or I might have some 3-part cards with pictures. Car, A-R says R, car. So now we're learning 2 letters that make 1 sound. We already know our letter sounds. Each letter has a sound. If we're starting to write on paper, that's great. We're still probably practicing that a lot. Now we have what's called nomenclature cards. We can call them 3-part cards too, where they're matching up the label to the picture. And they don't necessarily have to be able to read the whole word, but they might recognize the beginning sound and the ending sound. They know carrots begin with k. Any other ones of these? That begins with k, that begins with k. All right, they're the only two it can be. Carrots, ending sound s. I bet it's this word, and they match it up, and they're learning the word carrots by doing that. And I'm not showing you everything in the language curriculum, but I picked and chose just a few things that I think are super important or work really well in my experience. And then here's the phonetic readers, the Bob books. And I mentioned that some might not be ready to look at the whole box, even though they know maybe 12 letters. In my experience, I've seen this box be very intimidating for the children, maybe because the letters are all mixed up, and maybe just because it's a lot. I find the same thing with books. I do a lot of practice, and I skipped over it, with reading 3-letter word cards until they're, blue in the face. 3-letter word cards, 4-letter word cards, because I'm not going to show them a book until I know that they can successfully and confidently read these words. Because once you put a book in front of the child, they might be able to read it just fine, but words on a page with a picture and a period and a capital here, it's a completely different story. So this is going to come a little bit later, when the confidence is there. And I might move my finger across the page and help them out, maybe to help them focus. Bob books, I have a couple other readers. I love books with real photographs. This is Things That Go. And I like when the sentence repeats, a car can go, a train can go. So they're gaining vocabulary by looking at the picture, as long as they know the word can and go. And the children in a primary classroom can go far with language. They can learn parts of speech. They can learn the function of sentences. The limits are endless.
So I am doing the math curriculum in the primary classroom, 3 to 6. And I just want to start off mentioning, as adults, we have learned to take a lot of shortcuts with math. So we've learned how to hold math in our minds, make mental calculations, but we had to get there some way. And a lot of that, we're going to backtrack and put ourselves in the minds of a 3 to 6-year-old and how they might start learning math. I never learned math this way. I wish that I did. But it's a wonderful way to start building what Maria Montessori coined the mathematical mind. And that basically just means sort of like the absorbent mind. We are able to absorb patterns within our environment around us, and that is essentially what math is. It's really just observing patterns. So that could be in nature, it can be in shapes, geometrical shapes, sort of, which is a great prelude into our sensorial section. But that kind of experience helps to, and visual and sensory experience helps to build what Maria Montessori called the mathematical mind. So, during the first year of a child's experience in the primary classroom, we really focus a lot on very concrete items, materials. We focus so much on the numbers 1 to 10 because that really is the basis for everything in math. The materials are a lot larger, so we're manipulating large pieces. The children get that in a sensorial way by carrying, for example, the number rods and feeling what the longest number rod and the number 10 rod feels like in their hands. It's the longest, it's the biggest, versus the number 1 rod, which is the shortest and the smallest. They do lots of work with counting, so 1 to 10, but mostly it is just starting with 1-to-1 correspondence. So basically understanding when you have one item and then matching it with the number. So if you have a dinner party at home and you have 5 people over for dinner and you want to set out 5 plates or 5 cups or 5 glasses or silver for people, you can ask your child to do that. Can you set out 5? And correspondence, that one-to-one correspondence. Can they count them? 1, this is 2, this is 3, all the way up to 5. So we're doing the same, applying the same concept here, learning how to count with the number rods and touching each one, so there's that sensorial component. There's a lot of movement as well with this work, especially with the bigger materials in the beginning. Some other ways that the children experience that one-to-one correspondence in their first year is through the spindle box, which is kind of the same thing, of counting specific numbers in each categorized compartment. There is the cards and counters, which is another way of the same practice, getting that 1 to 10 down. And then eventually learning what the numeral looks like, so putting a matching numeral to that. And we use the, kind of like in language with the sandpaper letters, we use the sandpaper numerals to begin to show them what the numeral looks like and then match that with the quantity. So once they have sort of that baseline of 1 to 10 down really well, then they can start to move on to a continuation of counting. So they might practice the teen board and learn routines this way. We incorporate a lot of, we start to incorporate the bead materials, the golden bead materials, the bead cabinet, which is a beautiful design material for linear counting and other concepts. But for example, with the teen board, they start to learn that they all say 10, so they have that base of 10. But when I add a number 1, I make 11. I can also show that with a 10 bar, which they also learn, and a 1. So 10 and 1 make 11. And then so forth. 10 and 2 make 12. And we're already starting to introduce the operation of addition here as well. So I love these boards. This is the teen board, and then we also have a tens board, which incorporates the numbers all the way up to 99. In the progression of linear counting, the 100 board is a really big accomplishment for a lot of children when they get to that point. Being able to line up all of the numbers from 1 to 100 and to actually see correctly which number goes where. So it's often done in partners. That can be a fun way to support each other. If one child is having trouble, is this 26 or 62, inverting them, they can kind of work together in that way. When they get to the chains or bead materials, this can be, again, sort of multiple concepts within one material, but they can start to count past 100 now, and then use the arrows to label each segment of the chain. Within this, the whole concept of the chains too, there is cubing and there's squaring, which happen, that they lay them out, the squares of each set, and then the cube of each set, and find out how many beads is in a cube, and they go all the way from 1 up to the 1,000 chain, so counting very large numbers. As they progress, and I'll also mention too that within the math curriculum, again, sort of also similar to language, it's not always a linear progression. So lots of things are sort of being taught simultaneously. While they're working on these kinds of materials with the continuation of counting, they are also being introduced to the golden bead materials. And this helps them understand the concept of the decimal system. And we introduce them to what the units look like, which is a small unit bead, what a 10 bar looks like, which is 10 unit beads, 100 square, and then 1,000 cube. And then having them translate that to wooden materials that represent the 1,000 cube and 100 square, and then large numerals and small numerals, where they can begin to read and form large numbers such as 4,328. What does that look like? This is also a wonderful opportunity for children to, again, begin to practice operations such as addition, or subtraction, or multiplication, or even division with the bank. I should mention too that this is a great way to practice exchanging, so what exchanging looks like at the bank. In other words, if you have 10 bars, you can exchange them for 100 square. Or if you have 10 unities, you can change them for 1 10 bar. It's the same thing. So starting to just set that foundation for carrying and later operations. As the children kind of work through those concepts, they're still manipulating a lot of materials, and there still is a lot of movement happening. But then we begin to pass into more abstract, and we start to move towards some smaller manipulative. So the bank game over here is a great representation of moving the stamp game, moving from the bank to these stamps, which represent what they learned in the golden bead materials. But again, they're just smaller chips. They still represent units, tens, hundreds, and thousands. And they can start to now record their operations, so addition or subtraction or multiplication or division, and begin to write them down now. And after they've learned, sort of what the numbers look like, they've had a lot of practice identifying them, and then of course, in language, being able to trace or write them, they can now record their own operations. As we move more towards abstraction and memory work, because again, we can take shortcuts mentally in our own minds, so the children are still working very concretely, but eventually they can start to build their memory by using materials such as the fingerboards, which give them an opportunity to do operations, and it's kind of like muscle memory of finding the answer, and then beginning to eventually remember what that answer is, working towards memorization, so then a blank board would be sort of the ultimate test, right, of remembering what maybe that answer would be. So there are opportunities for memorization, but after they've had a lot of this concrete work and experience. Another thing that is, again, sort of moving a little bit more towards less materials and more abstract is the dot game. And this is just another example of doing some operations with large numbers, but it's really all on paper or a whiteboard if you have that. And again, that is less manipulating of the materials, and now it's just coming into sitting and working on building that concentration and that ability to hold numbers in your mind and to be able to record that down. And then lastly, we start to work, again, even into more of the abstract things like fractions. When numbers start to mean different things, they start to be recorded differently. The clock, so time. And this can be, again, when the numbers start to mean different things, like the 1, and it was 05, or why does the 2 mean 10? And once they've had a lot of work, again, with the linear counting, maybe with the chains, like the 5 chain, you can begin to show them that it's just like skip counting, like we did with the chains, 5, 10, 15, 20, and that sort of thing. So it kind of all culminates together nicely, and yeah, and like I mentioned, it's not always a linear progression, but it is. It depends on the child, their readiness, and again, lots of things can be presented simultaneously, repeated, and then mastered.
I am presenting on the cultural curriculum. Right over here is the cultural curriculum area of our classroom, but really the cultural curriculum exists throughout our entire room. The cultural curriculum is what we use to help the children learn about their place in the world. We nurture their curiosity and wonder to help them feel more connected to the world at large. Through the cultural curriculum, children explore directly through both the materials in the classroom and through field trips. Whether it be making food, reading books, working with materials, or maintaining our school garden, each activity is an opportunity for children to learn about the world, themselves, and how they fit together. In other words, their place in human culture. Today I'm going to be talking about geography, zoology, botany, science, and history. I'm going to start here with geography. With geography, we try to start as large as we can and then work our way down smaller and smaller into the specifics. So our first geography lesson is the sandpaper globe, and this is just to, one, introduce that Earth is a globe, it's a circle, and two, to introduce that the Earth is comprised of two elements primarily, which is land and water. Once the children have internalized that aspect of the lesson, we move on to our painted globe, which shows all of the continents in the world that are in very specific colors that carry on through all of their work with geography. They're able to explore, find out where they live in the world. For us, it's North America, and then we move to something a little bit more abstract, which is our flattened globe, our world map. And this allows them to build the connections between what exists here and what exists when they're looking at it once it's flattened and side by side. As they continue on through, they begin making maps with labeling different parts of the world and learning the names of all the continents, the names of all the oceans, and then growing further and further specific into what states lie within the continents, what countries lie within the continents, and where they exist. Continuing on, we also have our land and water forms that the children will learn a little bit more about. They're familiar with the Earth being made up of land and water, but they aren't familiar with what all of the shapes are called. So they will learn about the peninsula, the strait, and just see how the different shapes of the land and water come together to create unique features that make up their world. Continuing on, we have our flag work. This is something really exciting that children primarily begin to work with in their second year with us at Greentown. They are able to use our flag book to explore all of the different symbols that represent the countries, the states within our world. They are then able to use some of our flag paper in order to make duplicates of the flags that they see and write the country's name. This is a great way to familiarize children with the different things that represent countries in the world, different states in the world, and help them have an artistic expression while doing so. As the children move into their kindergarten year, they often like to discover the nuances in the world that really hold their interest. Oftentimes that will start with a continuation of our flag work and learning about the parts of the flag. What part is actually the flag? What part is the stand that holds it? What part is the final image of the flag? It's a great way to introduce more vocabulary that might not come out in day-to-day conversation while also still nurturing their own genuine interest within the geography curriculum. So another example of the way that we can continue becoming more and more specific with geography is through different rocks and minerals. So we, in our geography curriculum, go from as large as the whole Earth to as small as the rocks and minerals that form it all. And all through the way, the children are guided by their own interests and own drive for their education. Specifically in their kindergarten year, a way that they're able to connect to the world through their own geography is all of the field trips that we have. So far, the children have had the opportunity to go to the Rittenhouse Square Market in order to practice interacting with that community, purchasing their own goods, and being out in the world and connecting with their city at large. I'm going to continue on to zoology. And I don't think it's any secret that zoology is an absolute favorite of children 3 to 6 years old. They are interested in all of the creatures that they can see, the biggest animal that they can find, the fuzziest friend, the most beautiful face. And we love to nurture that within our classroom. So with zoology, a lot of the times we will start with identifying a picture with an object and just simply matching the two. This is a great way to also introduce names of different animals, such as you hold this picture up, you find the small animal that goes along with it, we can introduce that this is a river otter to the children. It also helps them connect with their country itself. All of these animals specifically exist in the North America continent box. It's a good way to connect them with other creatures that they do not see in a day-to-day life that still exist with our world. Continuing on with memorization and moving away from the more tactile features, we have the 3-part cards. This also is our North American 3-part cards. We try to keep the color consistent to help really reinforce that these things are all connected to one another. Children can practice identifying the animal, comparing it with another and seeing are they the same, are they different, and trying to match the correct name with the photo that they are seeing. Another way we practice zoology is through our parts of puzzles. Here I have as an example the parts of a frog. A lot of children like to simply just take apart the puzzle, put it together, possibly trace the frog and create their own rendition of it. But as they continue through primary, we get into more of the fine details. We will introduce them to the frog book, which gives them details about what parts actually make up the frog and the purpose of those parts within that body. They can move on to practicing matching images between the two and memorizing the letters that go along with it to learn that the part that's highlighted in red is the frog's head. Children often want to push themselves to go the extra step and create their own parts of the frog book. This is fantastic because it helps them really internalize what they are seeing while also practicing their artistic skills and their writing. Oftentimes in the kindergarten year, they also like to take it another step further. They don't want to just know the parts of the frog, they want to know these stages of life. And we love to have that discussion with children of how in our lives when we start as small little babies and grow into adults, and it's very easy for children to make that connection. But with other animals, we all take on different forms. So starting with the parts of the frog, of the eggs that are formed, onto the tadpole, the froglet, and finally the frog that they are so used to seeing when it's talked about. We have a lot of opportunities at Greentown for children to have genuine face-to-face interactions with animals and incorporate all of this material into what they are seeing. With chick hatchings, we have the same materials out discussing what the chick's life cycle is like, what parts of the body are comprised of a chick. And it's just that extra step of that deeper connection of being able to see and experience and hold an animal while also internalizing and learning all of the parts of the body. It's something that children love to continue pushing themselves with, and we love to see them interacting with all of the chicks, the butterflies, and in primary ADM, our lovely lizard Mariah Carey. All right, I'm going to move on to botany. Oftentimes in most of the classrooms that you will see at Greentown, we are full of plants, and it's not just because the teachers in the classroom love the plants, it's because the children are so interested in learning about other living things and love to take care of the plants as well. In their first year, we will often start with just the task of caring for a plant in our environment. We will give lessons on how to water a plant, when a plant has had enough water, when a plant needs water. The action of taking care of a plant, of cleaning the leaves and making sure that it is going to be in a proper space to get enough sunlight so it can really thrive within our classroom. They will repot plants if we've noticed that it is outgrowing its space that it's in. All of these things to help learn about what a plant within our classroom needs in order to really nurture it and take care of it and watch it flourish. This also extends onto our play deck. We have our community garden, which is so beautiful, and the children love to help take care of by contributing to the compost bin, digging for worms to help create new soil, and tasting some of the herbs that they have helped grow within our garden. Away from the physical plant itself, we very similarly to zoology have the parts of puzzles as well for our botany. The children can similarly take apart this puzzle, put it together, make tracings, and explore the parts of the flower. As they become more comfortable with that itself, we will introduce some of the more vocabulary of Here we have the stamen. Here we have the pistil. These are petals. Here's the stem, the leaf, the roots. Really taking advantage of that sensitive period for language and helping them learn more about the things that are surrounding them within their world. As they are moving away from more of the tactile material, they will also move on to different books. For example, our Parts of the Flower book, where they are seeing more of the scientific words and learning how to pair them with different parts of the flowers while creating diagrams. And one of my favorite botany explorations that we have, especially in their kindergarten year, is our leaf walk, where we and teachers and the kindergartners will go on a walk through the neighborhood and pick up leaves that we find on the ground and bring them back to school and identify them. Identify what tree they come from, what trees are growing within our neighborhood, what trees do you pass every day on your way to school. And a little extension that we love to do of that is also practice and incorporate color mixing. What colors do we see within our world? How do we create them? How can we preserve them with a leaf that is going to be changing? Science in our classroom is practicing exploring the world objectively. This is going to be an extremely sensorial experience for the children. Some of the ways that we'll explore science in our classroom is experimenting with buoyancy. We'll put out work that has a tub of water and they will experiment with seeing which objects sink, which objects float. We will experiment with magnetism, putting out a bin with a magnet and finding out what is magnetic, what is not magnetic. Volume, of how pouring liquids into different vessels can change the appearance but doesn't actually change the amount. And solutions, of course. One of the class favorites is oobleck, creating a non-Newtonian form by just simply adding cornstarch and water, allowing children to experiment with all of these materials and come to their own conclusions with it. Is such a wonderful way to nurture that little scientist within them and allow them to explore the world through the scientific method. And I'm finally going to move on to history. With children 3 to 6, they are often living in the moment and have a difficult time distinguishing timelines. In the classroom, we try to begin with setting the mental framework of days, weeks, and months, and it assists them in structuring their sense of time and ultimately their own personal history. One of our best examples of this is the birthday circle. It's a celebration of the child where the entire community comes together. We light a candle and they carry our painted globe and we'll walk around the sun as we sing to them about how every time the earth goes around the sun, they age another year. And another way that we will talk about history is through notable people. Remembering how one person can have such an effect on our entire community, our entire culture. Discovering how Ella Fitzgerald had changed jazz music is something that children really love to learn about. What has influenced the world and what has made it what it is today. Another way that we will incorporate history into our world is just talking about current events and playing memory games of a notable person and their work. If it's an artist, we will have their paintings and play memory games with that, or 3-part cards of all of their work and all of their notable things that they have done. And it's a wonderful way to introduce children to things that they might not be interacting with every day. Overall, our goal through the cultural curriculum is to assist children in feeling connected to the world and see how they fit into human culture. Children 3 through 6 are endlessly curious, and it is beautiful to see as the more that they move through primary, they begin to hold a greater understanding of the world outside of themselves. Thank you.
Talk a little bit about social and emotional development, and you've now heard about how we teach children to we introduce the concepts of language, of math, of sensorial and practical life will come soon, and just as we teach them how to distinguish a B from a D or a 6 from a 9, we need to show them how to be a part of a community, right? And to take care of their classroom. So those skills are not innate. They must be learned, and therefore they have to be taught. So we do this in the way that a lot of early childhood settings do it, we use those things too. We reach out to parents, we have partnerships with parents, we read books, we have conversations, we mediate conflicts, we model, but there's a really special way that Montessori does it, and I want to highlight that for you because it's unique to the Montessori curriculum, and it is called the Lessons of Grace and Courtesy. And in Maria Montessori's infinite wisdom and deep respect for the child, she observed that children could exhibit the qualities of grace and courtesy. And so we can define that as grace being the outward expression of inner harmony, and then courtesy is the extension of that grace to your community and your environment, right? So she saw, oh, children are capable of this if we give them the skills, and especially the child from 3 to 6 because they are so attuned to movement and language. So they're in the sensitive periods for movement and the refinement of movement and language. So that means they're like, we all know as teachers, and you parents know, because your child is listening to everything you say. They're learning new words, they're absorbing new words, and they're also, trying to run the fastest. They're trying to walk the teeniest little ledge, right? They're refining their movements. And so we can take advantage of that natural desire to grow in those ways to teach them how to move and speak in a way that promotes social cohesion and harmony and the stewardship of their classroom environment or your home environment, which is another reason why I want to highlight this, because it's something you can do at home. There's no extra materials necessary, no magic that happens in the classroom. It's totally something you can repeat at home. So a lesson of grace and courtesy is essentially role play. So we will highlight a skill that we hope that the child will learn, and then we will demonstrate that skill, whether it is like speaking or it is moving, or both, a lot of times both. And then we will model it for them with another adult or an older child. Especially kindergartners are essential for this. We need those Ks because they have been doing these things for 2 years. This is their 3rd year, they're pros. So often we'll invite them to be the models, right, with us. So we'll model it for the children, and then we invite them to repeat. And the repetition is essential because they need to repeat it so that they can practice it in real life. So for instance, let's say you're going to a party and your child's going to meet a bunch of new people. And you know this a couple days ahead of time, and you think, they might want to learn how to introduce themselves. So you can practice that at home. And then that will give them that inner peace when they get to the party or they get to the event. I know what to do, right? And they're not learning it in the moment, and you're not saying, say hello, say your name, because they feel prepared. They're like, oh, I remember we practiced this, I know what to do. So that is why we do this, so that in our classroom, they feel prepared when they come into situations that are new to them or are different from home, right? The classroom is completely different from your home environment. There are not most likely 22 to 27 other children at your home. There's not all this material. So they need to learn these skills, especially at the beginning, but they practice them all through their time with us. And they range from introducing yourself, how to ask for a hug, to how to roll a mat, right? How to push in a chair. And we do explain to them why these things are so important in our environment. Because when you leave your chair out, someone might trip, and it does happen. And that's always, children are quick to point out, the chair wasn't pushed in and I tripped, so that's like a reinforcement of, oh, right, that's why we push in the chair. And this is what we do in the classroom. We have this bowl of some of our grace and courtesy, and they can take it out at a mat by themselves, and if they're old enough, like kindergartners, they can read it. So this is how to push in a chair, for instance, and then they can go and practice. Or we might do it at circle. And we'll take out a table, put it in the middle of circle, and we'll take the chair, and we'll show them how to push in the chair. I'm going to find, it doesn't really matter, I don't need to find it. I did find it. How to introduce yourself. So I have asked a willing volunteer to model with me, and then we will invite the, they didn't know, but they're going to also perform. So, this is my model with me. Hi, my name is Maggie. What's your name?
Hi, my name is Shelby.
Would you like to shake hands? It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Would anybody like to practice with a friend? Or you can practice with me. All right. Would you like to practice with me? Yes. Okay. Would you like to go first, or would you like me to go first?
I want you to go.
Okay. Hi, my name is Maggie. What's your name?
Hi, my name's Emily.
It's nice to meet you. Would you like to shake hands?
Okay.
Would anybody else like to practice? It's okay if the answer is no. Do you want to? Do you want to? Okay. But then, so there's like a double thing here, right? They get to practice and they get to repeat, but every time they're watching their friends repeat it, they're hearing it again and they're watching it again. So that's why it's really fun to do in the big group, and we can do it obviously proactively. We want to think of things that might be coming down the pike, like, oh, we might be going on a walking field trip, so we're going to practice some of the skills that would be required for that. Or we might be looking around the classroom during the work cycle and noticing, man, everybody is just leaving their mats out. I think we need to practice how to roll a mat, you know? Or I see a lot of jostling to get into a tight space, and that's a cue to us as the adults in the room later to practice. So we're not going to necessarily do it in the moment, right? This is something that we're going to practice later when the tensions are not high, when they're not like jostling. We're not going to say, stop it, we need to practice a grace and courtesy right now, right? We're going to help them navigate that situation, and then maybe later at circle, try not to make it too obvious who you're talking about, but you might say, I've noticed people are, struggling with fitting through tight spaces, and we have a lot in the classroom. Let's practice. What do you do when you are in a tight space? And so then we'll model, and then they can repeat. Yeah, I think it's really special about the Montessori environment, and it's something that's totally repeatable at home.